Hey everyone, welcome to another led86.com.au video. This time I'm going to do a modification guide for the Valenti rear fog light. I get asked occasionally how to rewire these, and there's a couple of guides around, but I haven't seen too many videos, so I had the opportunity today to rewire one for a customer, and I thought I'd demonstrate how I do that. So for this modification you're going to need a Valenti rear fog. This is straight out of the box and I'll describe the differences in a second. A pair of scissors, I've just got a little Swiss Army knife I can use here. Some shrink wrap, some solder, a small Phillip head screwdriver, a soldering iron which is heating up right now, and you don't need this but I find it helps if you can get a portable 12-volt battery. It's very useful for testing things as we go, and I'll demonstrate that by using it right now. So from the box, when you install one of these Valenti rear fogs, you'll notice that you have your reverse lights and your position. Well, you don't have a position light yet, you actually have a rear fog light, and as you can see they're connected together. The center triangle and the bar is actually one unit. And what happens is we have this extra, it's going to be difficult here, but we have this additional red wire which when you break, the rear fog flashes. Now what customers usually want from me is to rewire them so the position bar is separated from the rear fog. That way you'll still have function of your reverse lights and your rear fog, and when you turn on your tail lights the position bar is going to come on as well, separate to the rear fog. So to do that we actually need to open up the rear fog and just make a couple of wiring changes, which is fairly easy to do. So the first thing you want to do is just take off all these screws. Okay, so now all the screws are off. We can just lift off the back, work your way around the edges, and then open up. So here we have all the wiring on the insides. What we're trying to do is get this red wire to become our power line for that position bar. So we need to disable the function of the flashing brake light and rewire that. If you're not too familiar with soldering or anything, it's not difficult to do this. You shouldn't have too much trouble. And just to note, this is more for the Australian cars. It may not work for American cars because your rear fogs are a little different. So what we're looking for to start with, we need to find where this red line is going to. So if you sort of follow it to the back here, we can see we have red, green, blue and black. So the green, blue and black we can ignore. We want to follow this red. You can see the red coming through the back here. Continuing on, the red comes here, it splits and it goes to an orange and a black. And on the inside of this we can actually see, I'm not sure if you can see on the camera there, but it'll say stop, fog and ground. So this red wire is actually going to stop light. Makes sense because that's what's making it flash. So the first thing we need to do is cut this 2 wires off. So using our scissors, we just need to trim those wires right at the base as close as we can. Done. The next wire we need to cut, we need to bring power to that the orange to the red wire. So if you have a look at the position bar, we'll see a green wire coming off here, which comes back into this main board. So we want to trim the green wire here so we can connect it to the wire we just cut. So again, being careful not to cut any other wires, we trim that off at the base. There's a little bit of wire left there, so I'll just trim that off as well. And here we go. So now what we need to do is solder this green wire, which is going to here, to our red wire, which in this case, don't forget, is actually changing to orange and black, but it's actually the red wire. It can be a little easier to just disconnect that, so easier to work with. What we need to do now is expose a bit of the wiring so we can solder it together. So I like to just trim the edges off first, just a little tiny bit. This can take a little bit of practice, but if you've done it enough times you get used to it. Just a slight cut around the insulation and then pinching it off. There we have some wire on the end. Do it for the other side. Run the scissors around, maybe give it a little bend, and then pinch it off. And there we go. 2 wires exposed. Do this for the green wire. So again, just trim that little bit off the edge. And then slice around the insulation. They're very small wires, so you need to be careful not to cut into the wire itself. And there we have that. What I like to do is to kind of fan out these wires a little bit, just by sort of spreading the wires out. And then do the same for this side. So that way, well actually first we need a little bit of our insulation. And because this insulation is quite small, it only really fits 1 wire and it's joining into 2 wires. So I'm going to just make a small cut on the inside, and I'm going to put this insulation on the wire. I might just need to twist this up so it fits over. That can just go down there for the moment. Spread these wires back out again. There you can see it's kind of fanned out a bit. Now let's fan these ones out a little bit. So the reason why I fan them together, or fan them out, is so when you join the wires, they actually kind of fit over each other, and then you can pinch them and twist it all together. Just give it a few twists until it feels like it's holding itself together. So there we go. So if you just sort of wrap two wires around each other, you end up with a bit of a knot, and then you're soldering over the knot. So I find it's a bit cleaner to spread the wires out and then you mesh them together and then twist. That way when you solder it, it tends to be a bit more consistent. So next thing we need to do is solder these wires together. And again, I'm not an expert at soldering, but a little bit of practice and it's fairly easy to do. So what we need to do here is just start by placing the tip on the wire, letting a bit of heat come into it, and then eventually we'll, don't hold it on too long because you might end up too much heat into the wire and then you could start melting things. So you just want to get it to the right temperature, testing it as you go, and eventually the solder will start to melt into the wire. And you just tap on that like. You just need a little bit. That's all we need. Turn your solder off, make sure you don't kick it or touch it because it's going to burn. I actually burnt myself there the other day. Okay, so once that cools down, just have a look at it, make sure it's a nice clean solder. And now we're going to connect it back up and just make sure everything's working. Sorry, I got a bit of cold today. So we'll flip this back over and just give it a quick little test. So this is why the battery is really helpful. It's portable, it's rechargeable, and I can take it anywhere and test things. So now, first thing we'll test is the reverse light, well, our rear fog. So we can see straight away our rear fog is working independently. Then the next wire will be the reverse light. And there's our reverse light. Now, keeping our ground connected, we can connect to this red wire, and that is now on its own. So, we're happy our wiring is all working, our soldering is good. Can flip this back around. We need to then just fix up our little shrink wrap so we can slide that back up. And as I was saying, I made a little incision on the top side because it's two wires connecting to one, and it's quite a small shrink wrap I've got here, so it just helps sort of push it up a bit further, otherwise it would butt up right against the end. It's unlikely any water is going to get into this actual unit itself, so it's just, to insulate it. Using a lighter, we can just run it around here. You don't want to burn it, just keeping a little bit of heat on. Squeeze the ends down and work towards the middle. Then maybe one just quick run over that. A bit more of a squeeze, and it's all insulated. So we now need to put the back on. Just careful of your wires, make sure nothing's going to pinch down. There's a few little screws that come into place, so we don't want to cut any wires when we're setting that back down. So just check it all as you're putting it back together. Give it a little bit of a push down, and then start putting your screws back on. You can see the screws are back on. Once I put the screws in, I like to just go over it one more time. Just test that everything's tightened down properly. You don't want to go overboard, but you want to make sure it's sealed properly. There we go. We'll give it one more test just to make sure everything is working correctly. Make sure none of the wires have been cut or pinched when we're putting those screws back into place. So we'll just give it a quick test. See our rear fog's working, reverse lights are working, and our position light is working. So there you go. So as I said, a couple of notes, this is just for the Australian version and probably Japanese version 86, maybe not so much the American version because you guys don't actually have a rear fog bulb, so you know it's a little different how yours work. It's a fairly easy mod. It's a very popular mod to do to the rear fogs, and just a little bit of beginner knowledge, you can do it quite easily. So I hope this has been helpful to everyone that's been asking how to do it for themselves. And if you have any questions, let me know. There is one more note. The wiring colors may be a bit different, especially with the older lamps, like from a couple of years ago. The colorings and the actual way they were wired were a bit different, but everyone that I've seen for the past couple of years have always been this configuration now. So, you know, if you buy one today, it'll likely be this kind of setup. So hope you enjoyed the video and it helps you out, and I'll be putting more content on the channel as soon as I can. Thank you.